But it's time to move on with the program, and the program now will be a global session on building inclusive workplaces. And I'm tremendously happy to introduce three fantastic speakers and a moderator who will guide us through the discussion following the presentations that we'll hear. We're going to first hear from Franca Ismail, who is a specialist on the future of work. She is a young entrepreneur, and she's working extensively directly with businesses on diversity and inclusion issues. Next, we will have Susan Scott Parker, who is the founder and chief executive of Business Disability International. She's a thought leader to mobilize business behind the economic and social inclusion of people with disabilities. And this will be very exciting. I know I have met and heard Susan before, and it is incredible how much we underestimate the potential and the benefits we as society can gain through her work. So I'm very excited about hearing her. And last of the panelists, we have Dana Staskell, who is a senior engineer at Oracle, but she will be talking to us not about her work at Oracle, but she will be talking about her work, which she also extensively has done for many years on gender and diversity in business organizations. And the discussion will be moderated by Marta Fröhlich, who is a senior fundraiser at Light for the World, an Austrian-based global NGO that is working towards the inclusion of people with disabilities in poor regions of this world. So they are doing amazing work on, providing inclusion, providing livelihoods, providing dignified life, opportunities for dignified life for people that are having, a much more difficult and adverse environment in which they need to come by than we all do. So I'm incredibly grateful for having you here, and I do not want to take too much time away with long introductions because Susan has to leave a little earlier, and we are all wanting to hear our panelists speak and not myself. So I would suggest, Franca, if you're ready, I will make you co-host, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you first for the opportunity to share my thoughts here. I will share part of my screen with you. I hope then you can see everything. Let me check. So I hope that you can see the presentation now.
We can.
You can. Perfect. Thank you for the feedback. So I will try to keep it quick and short. My name is Franca, and I'm based in Berlin, in Germany. And I worked several years at a company, a pretty young company that's focused on supporting social entrepreneurs around the globe to support their develop their social business ideas. And we also worked with a lot of different corporates and other organizations on several topics. My main focus is as a facilitator, and I developed several programs, educational programs for companies and for individuals. So my passion is all about personal development and organizational transformation, also with the focus on culture transformation. And to support organizations also to come for the, let's say, the old way of working to the new way of working. So the to say the working environment 4.0. And here I also have my focus on building mindsets and purpose within a community, teams, and organizations. And so, as you can see, my focus is really on personal development, relationship management, and then also culture transformation. And this is also where I would like to set my focus on during the next 20 minutes to give you a brief overview about my perspective about diversity, where it starts and the connection to mindsets. So why, from my point of view, building a mindset is crucial to also develop diversity in communities and also organizations. So first, when we talk about diversity, so we often talk about a gender quota. One second. Yeah, we often talk about gender quota, or about female empowerment, diversity in people of color, mixed generations, or different educational and cultural backgrounds. And while all these aspects are very important and crucial, and to build a diverse workplace or society, so also from my perspective, they do not remedy enough to solve the source of the problem. And I believe that the path to a more diverse environment is through also changing and developing a collective mindset with a perspective to these elements. So like the quota and female empowerment and diverse people of color. And so that we are developing a holistic approach to embracing diversity and change. And let me show you what I mean with that. So from my perspective, building a mindset that's supporting a diverse environment, it needs to start within ourselves. So firstly, it requires embracing an open mind within ourselves. And once we have opened ourselves to outcomes beyond our current thinking, I think that we can start to develop strategies based on curious awareness of our inner workings. And through understanding ourselves with an open mind, we will also be able to build strategies that embrace diversity from the inside out. And let me give you a nice example. So maybe some of you know Faust. Faust is a poem from Goethe, a famous German poet. And in one of his works, the person Faust, he says he was complaining about the two souls in his chest. And then later, also a famous German history person, he replied to this quote from Faust, and he said, Faust complains about the two souls in my chest, in his chest. I'm, however, harboring a whole lot that is quarreling. It's like being in a republic. And maybe you also know it from yourself, the inner different personalities that you have that are sometimes fighting and arguing within yourself. And there's a third person, his name is Schulz from Thun. He is a German psychologist, and he said, the goal for inner peace and fulfilling your potential is to connect these inner souls and to appreciate them. So by appreciating each of the inner parts that you have within yourself, so to really appreciate the inner diversity. So this as the first step to build a diverse mindset. And secondly, the second level is the interpersonal relationship. So also, so the level of me and you. And also let me give here an example. So maybe it may not seem relevant for you, however, at one point at our history, and maybe also it's still relevant today, people often looked for opposites in the other partners. And the feeling of the otherness from your partner would fulfill your personality, like the role, just to say, like the yin and yang. And people were looking for the otherness and appreciating it as the missing part in themselves. And nowadays, if we have a look, people are often looking in relationships more and more on similarities or things they can agree on. So, and sometimes this restricts us to a bubble of similarity that can have a flow on effect and blocks us from engaging from diverse activities or what a diverse group of people. Example of this is, for example, also the impact of social media on our lives and our community behaviors, like Facebook, Instagram, or Tinder. All have the metrics that keep you in a bubble of what you agree or with people with similar experiences. And here I also would like to give you, just for a reflection, a few questions for your to reflect your relationships with others. So the questions that I would like to share with you is, what is more important for you in a relationship, finding similarities or embracing the otherness? Then what makes you a good conversation for you? To agree or to discuss different point of views? And third, how diverse is your circle of friends? When did you talk the last time to someone from a totally different background than yours? And I think these questions can support you to reflect on your inner environment, so your close environment of people, and just have a look. For example, in my environment, I'm surrounded with a lot of people with like trainers, but also artists and designers. But I don't really have that much scientists around myself or handcraft people that I would love to have more in my environment. But sometimes it's hard to find them or to get in contact with them. And then let's come to the third level. The next level is, let's say, the world or the society level, and also the working environment that we have. And here I would like to give you just a few numbers that I found. Here are some trends that are shaping the future. For example, for recruiting. So recruiting is at the end the first steps where we have influence to bring more diverse people in our working environment. And here you have the statistic. It is from 2019, I guess. And there are 4 major trends. And the first here you can see is diversity. 87% think that diversity is tremendously important for the future on working environment, and only 53 say that they have adopted or implemented diversity in their working environment. And another fact here, also which is connected to the topic of mindset, is that the top of 4 trends transforming your workplace is the topic of soft skills. So everything that's related to emphasize, communicate, listen, and interact with different people. So here you can see also the interaction of the numbers, why not only diversity, but also the mindset, how you can develop and create a diverse mindset is crucial. So to sum it up, I think no matter where barriers manifest, it creates a canyon that becomes increasingly difficult to navigate. Through developing strategies that begin with our self-reflection, we can transfer this process to a global scale, thus building bridges over existing canyons and reducing the likelihood of new divides being created. And what I want to make clear at this point is all of these divides start in our mind, are in our imagination, and no matter how high someone wants to build a wall, it starts within ourselves. And now the question is, what kind of mindset do we need to work on a diverse, on diversity? And I think those 5 parts of a mindset are crucial to embrace diversity. It is an open mindset more than a fixed mindset. And it is second, trust more than skepticism. Third, it is respect more than the ego. And fourth, curiosity more than safety. And fifth, a holistic way of thinking more than a casual or linear way of thinking that can build a diverse mindset. And to bring a little bit more praxis into this last 3 minutes, I want to give you an example of a case study that I've worked on for many years. It was a tandem program with a huge global company. And for them, we developed a tandem program where employees from this company and people with migration and refugee background, we brought them together, and together they built an initiative that contributes to a more diversity, tolerance, and openness. And for example, the last group, they have developed 2 initiatives. They have developed a video about what does home and tolerance mean for you, and also a cooking book about their most loveliest family recipes, and the story about each recipes and some biographic stories from the participants, and so a cooking book around the world. And we had this project, so it's called Meet the World, for around more than 10 cohorts over the last 3 years. And what we've learned from this program was that the H&M employees, some of them also had a migration background, that the experiences that they had with people with refugee background, but also the refugees, the experience that they had with the locals, that we could really decrease prejudices beyond those different groups. And some of them, they built friendships, they still exist. And so this was a program which really is, from my perspective, a best example how you can really do something to increase diversity in your workplace. So, and now I can see my 20 minutes are gone, and yeah, I hope I brought some new and fresh ideas for you, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Franca, for sharing your insights, also for sticking to the time. And because our next speaker, Susan, I know, Susan, you're pressed for time. I know you have some very powerful messages for us. And I also know that there's nothing I can say more eloquently on the topic than you can. So I will not talk any longer, but hand the floor over to you, Susan, please.
You're muted, Susan.
Susan, you might be muted. We cannot hear you. Now, there you are.
No, she's still muted.
You're muted. We cannot hear you, Susan.
Okay, I clicked on the magic.
Now we can.
Now, all right.
Now we can. So leave it as it is.
So thank you. I wanted to approach my comments today by starting by saying that I think we have three really big opportunities in front of us now. One is to take a very fresh look at how we empower organizations to benefit from the contribution of the world's more than 1.3 billion people with disabilities. Is there a problem?
Can you please mute yourself? Luciana, please mute yourself.
Okay, so shall I start again? I was saying that we have a real opportunity on three fronts. One is to look at how we empower organizations to benefit from the contribution of the world's more than 1.3 billion persons with disabilities, including those, of course, who are going to become disabled in the future as we age and with the advances in medical science. We've got an opportunity to challenge the assumption that disability is somehow best managed and owned by HR and or the diversity industry, even though diversity practitioners rarely, sometimes never, actually mention people with disabilities. I'm toying with the idea of campaigning for alphabetical equality, that is, they list age and gender and ethnicity and nationality and disabilities always at the end. At least if we had alphabetical equality, we'd kind of come in after age, I think. And there's an opportunity to challenge the assumption that's implicit in business case arguments. So I'm really going to focus a lot on how we persuade disbelievers, if you like, with these business case messages. We need to challenge the assumption that's implicit in business case arguments that it's okay not to treat disabled people fairly if I or you or they have failed to present a compelling business case. So I wanted to start with my light bulb story. So I was talking to a young woman working for a huge multinational company. She told me that 18 months earlier, she had told her manager that the light bulbs were giving her migraines, which is why she was taking so much time off. 18 months later, she was still taking time off. They had not changed the light bulbs. So the question when we probed was, well, do they have an obligation to give her new light bulbs? Can she prove she's somehow disabled according to some legal jurisdiction? Who decides which light bulbs? Who orders the light bulbs? Who pays for the light bulbs? And of course, who failed when they negotiated the contract with the facilities management suppliers to make sure that there was a speed of performance standard in there, which said you have to adapt the built environment within 14 days, 20 days, whatever, when it's someone with a disability who's actually triggering this request. So I tell that story to ask, is that a disability story? I mean, there are some places where you would argue that someone with a migraine might not even qualify technically as having a disability. Certainly in Germany, they wouldn't qualify under their employment quota system. Is it a diversity story? But actually, we know that the diversity manager has very little influence over the way procurement contract with a facilities management supplier. So for me, the real story to this light bulb story goes, we need to look at the impact of disability incompetence in the business, exacerbated by the assumption that disability somehow belongs to diversity, and then not giving diversity the power or the authority to task procurement with ensuring that the service level agreement with facilities actually does say you will do this within, say, 14 days, which is actually quite doable. So the questions that this kind of story always triggers are, whose job is it to ensure the light bulbs get changed? I mean, we don't have a chief productivity officer at C-suite. So who actually owns all of those processes that I've just described? And I suppose the big question for this conversation is, would your organization need a business case to justify changing her migraine triggering light bulbs? Well, GSK decided it was a cross-departmental responsibility to actually ensure that all their people got the tools and flexibility in the work environment they needed in order to do their best. So they've set up a global disability council, very senior level, chaired by someone who sits on the executive committee, with senior leaders from across technology, procurement, property, and facilities, as well as HR, occupational health, and so on. The entire top team, if you like, represented. And their job is to drive improvements in their disability performance, because they know that improving their performance means they'll get business benefits like enhanced productivity, enhanced employee engagement, better customer experience, reduced costs of absenteeism, brand reputation, and all those things. But the point I make is, it's the business case is for improving their performance by learning how to change light bulbs. So the point too I want to make here is that none of the processes I've described are actually logically owned or readily influenced by HR or diversity. So the opportunity I'm presenting is that once the business connects on this, you can really transform business performance in a way that benefits people with disabilities everywhere. Now, another one of my favorite stories is the bank that opened up in Canary Wharf, 9,000 workstations and 9,000 right-handed mice. So they'd completely forgotten 10% of their workforce are left-handed. So again, is that a disability story? Would you regard a left-handed person as disabled? I bet they'd get a bit cross in many places if you did. Is it an HR responsibility to somehow police the balance in numbers between right-handed mice and left-handed mice? No, we wouldn't go there. But this is to do with business efficiency and enhancing productivity. And it's to do with how much disability and expertise in accessibility you need to have in your IT department, who then make sure that when they go out to buy anything that really matters, they've just consulted their people. I kind of like to think they might even occasionally remember that left-handed people exist, but all I'm after is if they were really into universal design and the benefits that brings, they would have consulted. So I wanted to throw out a few business relevant facts. Knowing full well that statistics do not change behavior, but they do capture the attention of senior business leaders in a way which then helps us to move on. And of course, they help you understand your people and your customers. So we know that 15 to 20% of the population of any country will have a disability. We know that 1 in 3 customers or employees aged 50 to 64 will have a disability. We also know that 80% of the UK's wealth is in the hands of the over 45s. So, you know, some bankers have put that together to good effect. We know that the average age of Ftse 250 board members is 62.3. Now, I love this one because it actually means that inevitably we've got quite a few people with disabilities sitting on Ftse 250 boards. They don't think of themselves as disabled. They would probably be reluctant to take on the skills, on the brand, I mean. And they probably already have a personal assistant or a chauffeur that acts as kind of an adjustment to make their lives a bit easier as they go to and fro doing their job. 1 in 3 people generally are disabled or close to someone who is in their circle. I think it's probably higher, but that's the European Union estimate. And that's regardless of ethnicity. And yet somehow when we talk about diversity and ethnic minorities, it never features. 1 in 5 women worldwide will have a disability. I mean, I love that valuable 500 insight. They point out that there are more clothing lines for dogs than there are clothing lines for women with disabilities. There are 50 million consumers, fellow citizens worldwide with dementia, with 10 million new cases every year. Just ask any bank what that means when their agents are talking to customers every day who can't remember if they have a bank account. 10 to 12% of the workforce will have a disability, hence the power of the purple space-driven purple light up movement with that big December 3rd event coming up as we speak. One of my favorites was actually a piece of British Airways research done some time ago where they found that 25% of their business class travelers were prepared to say that they had a disability. So I've always said the proof there is that those people don't enjoy paying thousands of pounds for every glass of champagne. It's just that their hips hurt back there in tourist class. And of course, I was reminded when you were speaking, Lusnia, that the German statistics found that 40% of refugees coming into Germany were reporting that they had a disability, because of course these things have a huge impact. I'm rattling this off as someone who has long experience sharing such data, because of course we have been doing remedial training year after year for MBA and HR graduates who usually start their careers without this grounding in human reality. So I want to come back to the business case thing because this is so important. unpack it a little bit on why the traditional business case for disability really doesn't work. I mean, you've seen that over the years. And I would suggest that the traditional business case for diversity, as it's being reiterated now, really hasn't delivered much for us either. Let's start with the way it's framed. What if instead of saying, what is the case for diversity, we said, what is the business case for treating people fairly? All people, not just some, including, of course, people with disabilities. Would we get a better result if we said, what is the case for fairness? This conversation always triggers the memory of my talking to a young man in a wheelchair at a conference some years ago who said, why do you need a business case for treating me properly? The subtext to that for me was always, how many of me do you need before you treat me properly? How many blind people do I have to prove to you might actually want to apply for a job someday? And of course, the business leader standing next to this young man is probably wondering, is hiring him going to cost me more than he's worth? As an aside, has anyone ever seen a senior player do a presentation explaining that their business would benefit by ensuring disabled people were not treated fairly, by not doing diversity? Sometimes I think we're spending a little too much time answering arguments that they cannot present in terms of the counter messaging. Remember, there was no business case for abolishing slavery, quite the reverse. So what I'm trying to do here is to stress that we have an opportunity to challenge the traditional way of thinking about business case, to say, yes, of course, everyone has to benefit. And we know that treating people properly is good for business. So what we have to be doing is demonstrating the economic and ethical rationale for improving your disability performance, improving your performance as a business when it comes to whatever issue it is we're trying to engage them on. We need to get this balance right in terms of understanding the rationale for understanding the impact of disability on the humans you employ and on your human customers, for understanding the impact of disability on the markets and economies in which you operate. Most senior business leaders claim they want to understand the world in which they do business, whether they don't at the moment. Another problem with this disability business case is what you hear when they say, and I hear this every day, well, but we're doing race and gender. We can't focus on disability as well this year, maybe next year. I don't for 1 minute think that they believe what they're saying is, well, we're prepared to treat disabled people badly this year or maybe next because we're busy with other groups. But actually, they assume, and indeed the industry, the diversity industry generally tends to assume that they have somehow delivered equal opportunities already, that they've delivered fair treatment. It's no longer relevant. Well, actually, the same company that would say to me, we're not going to do disability this year, will have HR directors buying artificial intelligence powered recruitment tools, which, because they drive standardized processes, are guaranteed to discriminate against disabled candidates who need flexibility if they're to compete on merit. Why do accredited HR professionals not run a mile when told a process is standardized, rigid, everyone has to do the same? Because that's removing human bias. I'm sorry I can't be with you for your discussions later, but I'd love you to answer that question. Why don't they understand that standardized processes are discriminatory? However, I am pleased to say that, of course, we are moving in the right direction. We are seeing increasing awareness that we need to shift this whole debate from are disabled people worth the bother, or indeed is diversity worth the bother, to articulating much more clearly what I call the economic and ethical case for adapting for human reality. I'm convinced that ultimately the only business case that holds up to scrutiny, as opposed to generalizing about hundreds of millions of people, and the only business case that has the potential to drive real change is that, and I'll say it one more time, it's the economic and ethical rationale for learning how to adapt for human reality. Human reality, I would say, point out today, which now includes the hundreds of thousands, it may probably millions of people who are recovering slowly from COVID-19 and are going to require their employers to make disability and accessibility related adjustments, even though those individuals may never call themselves disabled, but they're going to need the kind of flexibility that a disability competent company knows how to deliver. And I do think we're seeing a paradigm shift driven by the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the UN Convention. So we're seeing a move away from the problem is your disability, there's nothing I can do about your multiple sclerosis, your blindness, to actually the problem is we don't know how to recruit anybody on the basis of talent, capability, and potential. Oh, you mean I can do something about that? I could train my recruiters. We're seeing a shift to the problem is our online recruitment message. When you click the button that says accessibility, it says, and I quote from an online process I was looking at recently, you click the accessibility button and it says, we regret we are unable to make this process accessible in any way. Now, their diversity manager is probably also saying, I'm focused on race and Black Lives Matter. The 4 questions then that I would pose, because Ernst tells me many of you have the real influence, if you like, in terms of business, the prestigious business schools with which you're connected. And so I would really be interested to hear what you think. Could you, in your group discussions, answer just 4 questions? 1, why don't MBA graduates know that a disability and accessibility competent company enhances productivity, engagement, new product development, does a better job with their customers? Why don't they know it already? Why do MBA graduates not understand the impact of disability on their customers, on their people, and on potential people, their talent pool? How can it be that so many MBA graduates moving into positions of power have so little understanding of human reality? I suppose that's kind of all those questions coming together. And finally, if there are business schools on this webinar, how many of you have asked Paul Polman to share his rationale with the professors, with your consultants, your advisors? How many of you have asked him to share his rationale for launching Valuable 500 with Caroline Gooding and Accenture and Omnimedia and Bloomberg and Fujitsu, etc.? Because I would suggest that you're out of touch with where the best thinking now is if you look at senior business leadership, if you don't understand why Paul Polman, when he was chief exec global Unilever, said we have to do something about this. So thank you very much for letting me come. I'm sorry I can't stay for your whole discussion, but I do have 9 more minutes. So I'll stay for a few more minutes and then I'll have to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. The comments I'm reading in the chat are all showing how impressed we are by the facts you're sharing, the narratives you're providing, and providing us with a reality that we are normally not seeing and that we are very easily overlooking, but which is so relevant for all of us, and especially relevant for the theme of this conference, which is unity and diversity. I want to now hand over to Dan. Please, I'll spotlight you. And we met a year and a half ago, I think, or 2 years ago, here in Geneva, after we had been emailing already through a mutual friend. And I'm deeply impressed by your story and how you combine the engineering world with your strong and passionate work on gender and diversity in business organizations. So please, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Hi, Ernst, or hi, everybody. I'm Dana Staskell. Dana is how it's pronounced. I know it's kind of hard. And pardon? And so one minor correction. I'm not what we call a senior engineer. Rather, I'm what we call an architect at Oracle. That's our version of a distinguished engineer or a technical fellow. I do computational geometry, cryptography, distributed systems architecture. Ultimately, I'm an engineer and mathematician. And this is at Oracle what we call the top of the ladder. And presently, I'm the only woman at my level for my organization of about 10,000 individuals. Progress is slow, but we're focused on making it happen. Earlier this year, I was the first woman ever to be promoted to this level in Oracle Cloud. But I'm not here to talk about that specifically. What I want to talk about are the patterns that I've seen over the past 27 years as a mathematician and an engineer in this field of what actually works to level the playing field for us. I'm not specifically going to talk about Oracle. I can't, in fact. I haven't heard back from Oracle Legal on whether or not we can talk about certain statistics. So I'm just going to talk about the big picture and the patterns and the things that I've seen. So the healthiest context to approach this with, I'm a mathematician, I'm an engineer, I'm not a manager, I'm not a member of human resources. These are techniques that me and my colleagues have developed throughout the years through lots of different companies that everyone can do regardless of their level of authority or influence to make teams more inclusive. So I want to start out by addressing the cornerstones of what I see are inclusive workplaces from a gender focus. And big picture, the thing that all of these have in common is that they address the elephant in the room, which is privilege. But frequently you can't use the word privilege. You have to describe it. You have to say, these are the problems that we're all free to ignore because they don't face us personally. Or as Susan says earlier, being able to adapt to human realities. So you can call these things invisible problems, you can call them someone else's problems. It's best not to use privilege because that's a highly politicized term. But if you're looking at intersectional feminism, that's the word that's generally used. So the most useful patterns that I've found is that the core message here is that you need to demonstrate what's called active listening and boundary respect. So I'm going to give you two different ways to do this. Here, I'm going to share my screen. There's a hard way and there's an easy way. The hard way to do this is to construct a graph, a mathematical graph, of all of the different ways that all people influence all other people in your organization around decision making. And then you're optimizing for a certain couple of core variables. And the hard way to do this is you're maximizing for a variable called optimizing for a variable called intersubjective human agency. So when you model this, when you model social relationships in this kind of computational meta-ethical way, each one of these dots on the graph is a person, and each one of these arrows on the graph is an influence between people for some kind of socially normative function. So we start by defining agency as the ability of each person to make and act upon a decision that can affect others. If we optimize just for that, you don't optimize for a property that includes everyone, so you get massive power asymmetries. This is kind of the status quo that we're trying to work against, is maximizing individual value or optimizing individual value. Instead, we want to look at this property of a social network, of a social, as a mathematician, we would call it a social graph. We want to look at this property of the graph called intersubjectivity. And that's the set of properties of a group that exists between each individual rather than within each individual. So here, once we have this concept of intersubjective human agency aligned, this is most clearly defined as the ability of a group of people to align on a goal and then execute on it together. And that's really the variable that we want to optimize. So that's the hard way to do it. Like if you want to go collect data and make a model, a complicated meta-ethical model of who has what normative influences on who else through whatever factors, however this works out in your organization, you can do it that way. That's the hard way. Or the easier way to do this is to treat people how they want to be treated, rather than treating each other how we might ourselves want to be treated. And if you don't know how somebody wants to be treated, the simplest way to do that is ask, and then listen. So, okay, stopping the screen share. So, when we're talking about treating each other how they want to be treated, the cornerstone of this is that the imaginative role taking that underpins the golden rule really kind of breaks down when we aren't all aware of all of the problems that only face other people. these privilege-based problems. So what compensates for this again is active listening, reflective listening, and boundary respect, which leaves room for supererogatory actions, these things that are morally praiseworthy but not morally obligatory. This also has the effect of optimizing around the impact of actions rather than the intent of actions, because here intent is ethically neutral, but the impact carries ethical weight. So by doing this, by accounting for these set of problems that are only visible to some subset of the population of an organization, be that people that don't have the same advantages based on race or on gender or on disability or any of these other factors that we come to an organization with and can't necessarily directly control. When we do this, when we treat people how they want to be treated, I've seen this have the effect of leveling the playing field for equality of opportunity without necessarily guaranteeing equality of outcome, because we don't want to guarantee equality of outcome. What we want to do is have a fair fight by leveling the playing field and then let all of our work speak for itself. So there are some programs, efforts, and culture that make for an inclusive employers, and there's a couple of places where there's still room to step up this effort. One of the best practices that I've noticed is that teams that are optimally inclusive here align on values first, because the values are what define an organization. And the values that Franca was discussing earlier, trust over skepticism, respect over ego, curiosity over safety, which I've also seen as curiosity over judgment, holistic over linear thinking, having an open mindset, which I've also seen as called a growth mindset, where the short version there is you just add the word yet whenever you have all of these negative statements saying that no, a person can't do that. This is how you earn trust and how you build trust with an organization, is that you start with the values. And then on top of values, you align terminology, then standards, then goals. So there's a couple of different ways that I've seen that really work well to make this happen. One is there has to be a version of consensus in the organization that doesn't deadlock, and these do exist. So the easiest two mechanisms that I've found for this, one of which is called approval voting, another is simply collaborative design. And in approval voting, what you're doing is you're allowing people the freedom not to care. This is one of the reasons that consensus models deadlock so frequently when you're trying to account for everybody's perspective in the room. Sometimes you can't, and sometimes people need the freedom to not care. So the core mechanic here, this is a very short process, is anybody in a group proposes a group action. You give it a couple of days to review. And if everybody who chimes in on an action approves it and nobody blocks the action, then the proposal passes. And if anybody blocks, then you go back to the drawing board and propose something new. Another thing that works very well in my experience for leveling the playing field is to role model inclusive behavior without directly enforcing inclusive behavior. Because you really need to emphasize that the group is operating together intersubjectively to optimize towards a goal that we or leadership have decided to do. And the two core mechanisms there that work the best are reflective listening, which is getting people to repeat what they heard, which has the side effect of getting people to stop interrupting each other during meetings. That's one of the primary goals, but you can't say just stop interrupting people. What you can say is repeat what you heard and respect what you heard. And that second part, respecting what you heard, that's boundaries. Those are fundamentally healthy aspects of any social relationship. And this is the part where we're really focusing on treating each other how each other wants to be treated, rather than how we think the other people would want to be treated if we could see all the problems that they have that don't necessarily face us, that gets intractably complicated because of privilege, because of this set of all problems that each of us is free to ignore because these problems don't face us personally. So the last cornerstone healthy organizations, the way that they respond to this is you have mentoring and buddy programs. And these give us really two big advantages. One, they keep the work that we're doing visible, which prevents credit shifting and blame shifting and minimization of contributions and all of these things that end up disadvantaging people that don't come to the table with the same level of privilege as the most privileged people in the room. And the second major effect of this is that it sets everyone up with growth opportunities. So this establishes the equality of opportunity, again, without locking us into a reality where we're establishing equality of outcome, because that's not the goal that we're optimizing around. So yeah, to bring this full circle, we want to align on values first, and then terminology, and then standards, and then goals. We need some form of a consensus process that listens to everybody. We want to role model inclusive behavior without enforcing it. And these, like I say, the most tried and true mechanisms that have worked for me as an engineer over the past 27 years is this reflective listening and boundary respect. And we need to keep work visible. And what we're doing here is we're optimizing around the intersubjectivity of the human agency of the graph that's trying to do bigger things together than we can do on our own. And we can only really do that if we're all deeply aware of each other's problems, including the problems that only face other people. So again, you have to account for the elephant in the room, which is privilege, without calling it that. And then doing these things day to day as any member of an organization, an engineer, a manager, a human resources contributor, somebody with multiple MBAs, or somebody with a mathematics degree. Everybody can do this. One of the things that I've noticed, especially at more recent companies, is that there's a lot of allies in every direction. That is, whenever, like I say, I'm usually the only woman in the room. At my level, I'm the only woman at my level. There are hundreds in the room, and I'm the only woman. And of those hundreds, I would say about a third of the people in an average room are really gung-ho about leveling the playing field. They want to do absolutely everything they can do to make a more diverse organization and team. But they come to me and they say, "Hey, Dana, how do we do this? Like, give me options. Like, give me something that I can do to level the playing field for people." So these are the things that I say. You need to repeat what you heard, which implies stop interrupting people during meetings, which is kind of the core problem that most people run into at my level. You want to repeat what you heard, and you want to respect what you heard. And I do that same as everybody else does during meetings. The World Economic Forum says we're not going to see equality in our lifetime in their big report in 2018. But what they recommend is role modeling more inclusive behavior to create a level working environment. And that's what I've seen work here and at numerous other companies. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, that was fantastic. I enjoy listening to you via Zoom just as much as when we are in conversation personally, which hopefully we can have again soon. What time is it for you?
Oh, it's 5:54 in the morning here in Seattle.
All right, so you're in Seattle, so even more thanks to you for getting up so early. I got up at 6 this morning for our first panel, and I thought that was early, but you are even at least an hour before that, and so thank you so much for being awake and sharp and contributing so nicely to our conference. But I will now want to hand over to Marta, actually, to kick off the discussion. And I'm sure you've took lots of notes and have questions for both of our panelists that are still here. Yes, I can see the big sheet. Welcome, Marta. Thank you so much for taking up this role. And please.
Thank you so much. Hello from Vienna, and we have the afternoon. So I'm really impressed by Dana, that she... Pardon me, say it again.
It's Dana. Dana,
excuse me.
My family's from Czech Republic, but the rest of me is from rural Texas.
I'm from Poland, so Dana. originally. Then I married to a German, and now I have this nice name, Fröhlich. So thank you both. And of course, Susan Scott for this, Parker for these amazing talks. And I have, as Ernst saw already, a lot of questions, and I put down as well the questions that were raised by Susan. So maybe we can, in between, also ask then you and maybe even the audience. So I will maybe, because it's so fresh, Dana, ask you regarding this whole approach. Of course, always the elephant, I can imagine. It's first, congrats to your position. I know Oracle, and I know it's so mainly focused. And always when I had meetings, I was previously in the bank, always only men came.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, math, sales people, key accounts, all male. So it's an amazing career that you are in this position. So, and especially when I talk about artificial intelligence, mathematics models, etc. So congrats. Regarding your last points, what you repeated and wrapped up really beautifully at the end about which programs, efforts, there are also, I can imagine that these companies exist where you have these role models, etc. But if they do not have it, how they can really implement this listening to each other. This is something that it's always in meetings not easy. And then even respect what you heard. That's also fantastic. So how this is possible to implement this, or where did you see that it's really working?
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is you're asking how we can role model more inclusive behaviors and how I see this working.
Yes, and especially if it's working,
so
how it was implemented. Oh, sorry. Step after.
So the trick here is that this is a thing that you don't need influence or authority to do. What I just did was repeat what I heard from you and then assert that I respect what I heard from you. And these are things that every single contributor, every member of a team, doesn't matter if you're the manager or the intern, everybody can do this. And then what happens is you see this on a team one by one. People, all some junior engineer or even a senior engineer will ask me a question, and the first thing I do is repeat what I heard from them and then assert that I respect what I heard from them. And each member of a team, one by one, are going to start to pattern off of what other people do on the team that are more effective. So to give an example, at one point last year, we had a meeting where we pulled all of the top 2 levels of engineers in the company into a room. So that's about 200 of us. And again, I'm the only woman in the room. I ended up writing out 10 different patents in a field that I'm not going to say because we're being recorded. And this is something that, in this room of a couple of hundred people, there, I would say 5 or 6 dozen people who had approached me personally saying, hey, how do I make this better? How do I give everybody in my organization a level playing field? Because we want to see, over half of the people in the room want to see more women in the room, and more gender diverse people, and more orientation diverse people, and ability diverse people. All of this matters to most people, but they don't have good tools to do it. And if you go down, here's how you get a PhD in emotional communication, and here's all the different steps that you have to memorize and then execute, people are going to mess it up. If you just leave it to corporate training videos, it's gonna go in one ear and out the other. People mess that up. But if you role model it, if you do the right thing day in and day out, and just like I say, do these 2 very simple things: repeat what you heard and respect what you heard, that gets us out in front of this privilege problem. This set of all problems that any person in a group is free to ignore because they don't face each of us personally. So that's how I've seen this work, to be able to influence without authority on a team.
And where did you see this? Can you raise this? Can you answer this question? In which companies did you see this?
While we're being recorded, I can't really say. I'm sorry that my
But you
employer
can say the industry.
in tech.
Also, okay. Smaller companies, I can imagine more startups and
It works in both. It has worked in both, in smaller, more directed startups, in DoD advanced systems, mathematics research labs, in massive tech giants. Because it works at the individual level, not
yeah.
and then it flows up to the organizational level. This isn't top-down change. This is bottom-up.
Yeah, that sounds really beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have more questions to you, but let's ask now Franka. You have to know I had the pleasure to meet Franka in Germany because the company you didn't mention, the Do School, I was also supporting them for some months, and now I'm ended at Light for the World. Franka, it was so interesting to hear your approaches, especially from the inner me, starting then me, myself, and I love this. Then you and me, and then you have the world of working. Of course, H&M is a perfect example, and especially in Germany, they are doing a lot in respect of education and diversity, etc. Do you have maybe some example where the company is not so open, or did you help them to become so open and diverse 9 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm also working with a client. It is a public company in Berlin. So and there I'm working with people who are, let's say, on the basis, and so some of them since 20 years. Also, most of them are male. So I would say in each group that I'm working with, it's 80 to 90% men, and sometimes 1 or 2 women. And I do trainings with them to support them to become a team leader or a group leader, and they have to lead up to 80 people. And so they have, so also then you also mentioned the fixed mindset and the growth mindset, and exactly this is something where I recognize it very often. So the fixed mindset and a lot of skeptic about what I would like to tell them, especially, for example, when I try to explain them the different ways of listening. So there are 2 ways of listening. So one is the biographic way of listening that we do more common, and the other way is the empathic way of listening. So this is also with this listen first, reply what you have heard, also mention the feelings that you get from the other person, and then reply with open questions and not with a judgment or a guess what the other person could have meant with it. Because what we mainly do in the biographical way of listen is that we answer with the intention to bring something from our own biography. For example, ein Ratschlag,
Advice.
a device,
Advice.
or you say, yeah, I know this from another example, and then you answer to that. And this is not really productive for a really inclusive way of communication, and this is where it starts. And they struggle a lot with understand why should I do this, and it's childish to repeat what the other person have said. And then while they are practicing it, so more and more you can also see it in their face and their body language, that they can feel the impact. And this is also, if you just do it, and then if you experience it, the difference in the way of communication, different way of listening, then you immediately can feel the impact, and then maybe you will also adapt it and do it. So this role modeling, it really works. And yeah, so and we had a good success in that company. So, and I'm pretty optimistic that we can achieve more there.
Yeah,
But
with your support for sure. Yeah. Franka, and whose idea was to ask you to support? Was this the management, or was the change some external advisor?
I'm, as you know, I'm working as a freelance trainer, and the company, so they asked me and another colleague. So it really is a training program over 3 months. Over 3 months with with 4 modules, each 2 days. And before we developed the program, we talked to the person who gives us the task, and we talked about, okay, what is your culture company? What kind of leadership do you want to develop in your company? With what impact, what kind of way of working do you want to achieve in the future? And out from all these discussions, we've developed the content for the program.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much. Dana, I have a question from Ilona, and this is back to the questions what we had before about this listening and the respect. So the question is how to show respect, and because some people really, first of all, do not know what does this mean and how to show it in this respect.
Certainly. So when preparing for a report along these lines, that had, executive and human resources visibility, because I work with, the executives at my companies and the HR at my companies to make this better. When preparing for one of these reports, a couple of years ago, I went around to every woman I could find anywhere in my organization and said, hey, if I could get everybody at the executive, human resources and management levels, if I could get everybody in the room to do one thing, what would that thing be? And I collected all of these survey responses. I stack ranked all of them. And can anybody guess what number 1 was on everybody's list? Without fail, everybody had the same number 1 answer. And that's stop interrupting us during meetings. Stop cutting us off, stop talking over us. But what I can't do is say that, because that puts people on the defensive. So rather, this is why I focus on role modeling the active listening as the first component of what's the behavior that we really want to encourage role modeling. Start with active listening, because what that does is it assumes that you're not interrupting people during meetings. So we just create that baseline assumption that when you practice active listening, you're both actively being engaged with the other speaker. But at the baseline, what you're also doing is you're not interrupting people during meetings. So when we get to the point of how do you respect what you heard, which is the question that I heard from you, Alana, this respect gets to one of the core dynamics that builds this intersubjectivity graph of a team, and that's trust. In order for us to build trust with a team that we're very experienced with, or a team that we're very new to, in order to build that trust, we have to assume that our best interests, accounting for privilege, the problems that only affect us, we have to assume that those best interests are somewhere in the hearts and minds of everyone around us. Because, like I say, the way to get in front of privilege, because you can't make it go away. We're always going to have problems that only affect some subset of a group of people. But to get in front of this, you have to stop talking and listen. You know, the women in the room, we will tell you what's going on if you stop interrupting us and listen actively and do all of the other things. So the way that you role model how to respect what you heard is to show that you've heard, you show that you've heard somebody, you repeat the thing that you heard, and then you act with that in your heart as you know, their best interest sits next to your best interest, even if you can't see the problems that they see. I don't see a lot of the problems that men face in my organizations because I'm not a guy. But if I can keep their interests and my interests, you know, carrying the same weight, what that does is it optimizes that intersubjectivity graph, and it automatically allows us to act, you know, it gets us closer and closer incrementally to that goal of whenever each of us acts, we're acting closer in line with the values and the terminology and the standards and the goals of the whole group, and not just of our own individual interest. So the way to role model respect is to say, you know, when we're talking about what we're going to do, we want to be very open and transparent. Like that's the best way to build this kind of trust with a new team, is to be open about what all of these needs are, what all of these problems are, how these factor into the consensus that you're driving and then hearing and then responding, and then keep that with you every step of the way. This is what I do to role model respect, is to clearly communicate about what I'm going to do, and then do the things that I say that I'm going to do. That's how you earn trust and build trust, and that's how you build a team that can do more than the sum of its parts, by accounting for privilege.
Thank you so much. Ernst, may I include you in the discussion as well?
Of course you may.
Please. So please, maybe you can firstly mention what you wrote in the chat, and secondly, then I will have a little bit broader question to move a little bit to the questions of Susan Scott. Dana, thank you so much. It's so interesting to listen to you. Wow.
Right. I was just remembering a term that my wife has taught me a few days ago, or a few weeks ago, which I think is pretty much what you meant, right? I mean, it is this, you know, in the extreme form, it's this, don't you worry your little head, you know, do not behave in that way, do not do that, and it rightfully gets very strong reactions. And I just remember the term mansplaining to describe this, which this is just copy and pasted from Wikipedia, which describes a pejorative term meaning to comment or explain something to a woman in a condescending, overconfident, and often inaccurate or oversimplified manner. And I think we are champions at doing that, especially in business contexts when there's one or two women max in a whole room full of men. And so I just wanted to share this term that has been coined for describing this behavior, which, yes, understandably, it's top of the agenda that we should stop doing that.
I can comment this as well, because my husband is working mainly with men. He's working in the IT architecture and is responsible for the cloud in a huge bank, open banking as well. And he's also sometimes making jokes. I said, come on, you're not in the office. I'm not laughing about this kind of jokes. It's not for me. So stick to the team. But yeah, that's true. So before I will come to the questions of Susan, and back a little bit to focus on the topic of inclusive workplaces, what do you think, Ernst, is the biggest hurdle? I worked in many companies, and diversity was quite often more an image position, and especially focus on female and elderly people, but nothing else, and others similar in Austria. So what do you think is the biggest hurdle, that people are really have to have this quota for people with disability, or whatever this reason is, that this is really a topic that you have to think to include them?
I think there's, I mean, I'm not a diversity expert, right? We're choosing different themes for this annual conference. based on what we think is relevant and where we can contribute to our community, without every year having a theme that we or I have real expertise in. So I cannot tell you what the top factor is, but I can probably tell you a few things that I think matter depending on context. One is definitely male fear, right? In the gender diversity aspect, it's quite comfortable for us to sit together in a room with only other men, in the best case, all other men from the same cultural background, roughly in the same age. 40, 50, 60% of the communication is non-verbal. You don't even have to agree on stuff because you're already a very homogeneous group, and that's comfy. And breaking that up is frightening for many men, and you have to overcome fear. I think that is one big hurdle. Another big hurdle is awareness or ignorance, if you want to put it in a negative way. I think the data we heard from Susan, the percentage numbers, the number of people that are affected from disability in some shape or form. And we have no idea in general of what a big part of our communities, of our population is affected and is discriminated in some shape or form, because we do not manage to build more inclusively, and we are not managed to be embracing diversity in a more productive manner. And closer to the business context, I think one of the big hurdles is what Susan mentioned, the business case thinking, right? The fact that we are, yes, diversity ranks top on the agenda, as Franca mentioned, but my guess is that for many businesses, that they've somehow somewhere seen a business case that this is making them more productive, that this is better reflecting their customer base, and therefore the products will sell better, or that they get reputational benefits through that, and then the intangible asset value goes up, and all of these things, which it's good if we have them. But we shall not forget that the fundamental reason behind a need for inclusion and why we should embrace diversity is because we all share the same dignity. We all share the same right to a life in self-determination. And by being exclusive, by not working towards inclusion, we are depriving people of fundamental rights. We are depriving people of or we at least are hampering the ability of people to live a self-determined life, to autonomously define the reason of their being. And so those are three hurdles, without me being able to say which the biggest are. Business case thinking, one of them, fear, the other of them, and ignorance, unawareness, a third one.
Thank you so much. So yeah, can imagine, especially this non-verbal topic. And here Francis wrote, men, they say, talk at each other, while women talk with each other. Yeah. So I will, before Martina, I will read your question. I would like to raise one question of Susan Scott, and I can imagine that we can send her then the answer. And now I'm coming a little bit back to you, Franca, because you are the master of setting up educational programs and know a lot about education systems as well. I will start with the second question of Susan, and it's not only about MBAs. I can imagine that it's everywhere. Why don't students or people who finish the university do not understand the impact on a customer when you work in this kind of field of colleagues that have disabilities? So why really this is not a topic at all in the education, that this is normal to have, and that also somebody from the other side, from the customer's point of view, will be much more honored when people are there with disability, because you can see that the company is behind rights and share the same dignity, etc.
Yeah, really tough questions, and if I would have the answer to that, I would be a lucky person, to be honest. I really had several discussions also about this, and just a few aspects that we also recognized. I mean, when I also studied more or less economical study, and I had only one woman as a professor in my study, and I also talked with several other people, and during their study, most of them were white, old male professors. So the diversity itself at management schools, I think this is one aspect. And and there the diversity, I think maybe it's also a question about where does the content they teach at management business schools, where does it come from? And it is from a century also where diversity didn't play that much a role. It is more a profit and capitalism way of thinking. And all this way of thinking of emphasizing with the user, so the whole school about design thinking, where inclusiveness and diversity is the key to be innovative and emphasize with your customer, I think there's still so much work to do at schools or at management schools or wherever. I think even at schools and kindergarten, I mean, look at the German school system, that we have schools for special abilities or whatever. So inclusive schools is still an en vogue and new thing where you think, okay, wow, if this starts in the kindergarten or at school, so I think we don't need to ask much more why you cannot really find it at a business school. And then of course, if they then go to the real work life, so then yeah, where should it come from if it doesn't start before? And I think there are many other reasons as well.
You're so right, and then this is the same in Austria. And can you imagine, due to COVID and the schools were closed, there was a summer school in Austria 2 weeks before the school started to have the kids invited who maybe needs more support, etc. And afterwards, the green politician, don't want to mention her, posted on Facebook, we had really forgotten to make it accessible for people with disabilities and also include kids. Maybe they have disability with the ears, with eyes, and need wheelchair, whatever. So this is also something they were ashamed of. And this is the same that when I look on my past in my school life, and I was never in private schools, but in public schools, there was never a kid with a disability. They're always in specific schools. And this is something that would be the best way to put already kids together, because they do not care if somebody is white, black, yellow, speaks their language or not. They're always playing together and taking care of each other. And this is something that would be really beautiful, because, but in this respect, you're totally right. We are still in the previous century. Hopefully our grandkids will have something different. I have here some questions back to the colleagues here around. There is one question, one addition from, I have to scroll up. I have some questions for you. Francis said before, this meant they say talk at each other, other women talk with each other. So I would like to put the second question as well from her. Please, Dana, how can one listen to people who already have a deep prejudice against the point of view that's true you want to share with them?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and so I hear that, you know, the question of how to address people that have deep prejudice, it follows a lot of the same patterns that I hear Ernst talking about of when people start acting out of fear, because fear and prejudice are both undermined by the same kind of level of shared trust that we're talking about building. So the path to get there, when you're starting from a position where some members of a group, even if it's just a group of two, you and one other person, where some members of this group are experiencing some level of fear or some level of discomfort or some level of prejudice about the interaction, the two strategies that I've seen work well there to undermine this are bringing comfort to that person, bringing comfort and building common ground, showing some kind of common humanity, common struggle. And that has a profoundly unifying force. So where fear is undermined by comfort, which can be practiced by repeating what you heard, and by building common ground, which are these techniques that we've been talking about to build trust with a team, demonstrating that you've built that trust by accommodating all problems, not just the ones that face each of us personally, but demonstrating that you have that trust through the process of building common ground. Maybe you have a prejudice about, me being a woman, or me being lesbian, or me being, born in Texas and from America. Let's set these things aside and talk about the common ground that we already come here with. And generally speaking, that starts with, like I say, it starts with aligning values. Because regardless of how you identify with an in-group or an out-group socially, values are what define the group. So where these values are setting up boundaries that are fundamentally inclusive, which are, the values that Franca put up on the slide at the very beginning of this talk. These are outstanding, where you have trust over skepticism and respect over ego, curiosity over judgment, holistic over linear thinking, and having an open and growing mindset. These are the kinds of values that if you double down and say, okay, you might not respect me, I might not know how to respect you, we might not know each other, but if you're coming to this with a prejudice, you can build on that common ground of values that you either explicitly or implicitly both have, to bring comfort and common ground to these scenarios that have problems of fear and prejudice. This is the critical path to building this intersectional team. That is the process of each of us accounting for all problems, not just the problems that face only a subset of us.
Yeah, you need really to invest a lot of energy in this case and have more meetings. Yeah.
Start with
Sometimes
values.
no
Start with
patience.
good values like Franca's.
Yeah, totally right. Before I continue with the hands raised, Franca?
Yeah, I would like also to add something from Dani. There's a really nice explanation from Vera Birkenbiel that I really appreciate, that contributes to that point. So how can I communicate with someone who totally disagree or prejudice? And so you can imagine that everyone has his island, and if you're lucky, the island has an overlap, so that is the part where you agree. And if you're not lucky, you have two islands and there's no connection. So what you can do is building a bridge through this active listening and communication. Or if you are not able to build a bridge and there's no way of coming together, so then one thing that you can do is to agree to disagree. So just to say, so, okay, this is a point we don't come together, and just accept it.
Okay.
Disagree but commit is what I hear that called a lot.
But just to add on, I think that makes a lot of sense, Franca. The question for me is always, when do I invest in building a bridge and when do I just not bother? Because I don't have the patience, I don't have the energy, I'm wasting my time. I could do something valuable, more valuable with that time. That is, in principle, I think we're all aligned. You're lucky if the islands are interconnected already. If not, yes, we can invest in building bridges. But the decision of how much you invest into which bridge, there I am probably less patient than some others. But we all got to work on our own things, right? So maybe I'll grow to be more patient there.
Yeah, or sometimes we even can accept, okay, it's not working. Maybe somebody else can cooperate with this person. So this is also fine.
You reach the agree to disagree, but how much you put into before you decide that you should agree to disagree, and that is the tough choice, I think.
So now I'm coming to the question of Martina. Could Dana speak some more on intersectionality? It appears that the term has been politicized somewhat, but it's crucial to this discussion. And maybe you can also explain for me what you mean by this, because, yeah.
Certainly. So in the way that I'm using the term here, where I'm hearing you want more information on intersectionality, it's the process of each of us accounting for all of the problems that affect the whole group, any group, whether that's, you know, all women on earth or all women at this company or all, you know, some other aspect, all disabled people, all something. But you have to account for all of those problems and not just the problems that affect a subset of the team. Like that's the fundamental verb of being intersectional. And like I say, the easy path to execute on this is this treating each other as they want to be treated, which has, you know, the benefits that we've already talked about. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what happens when the way that somebody wants to be treated is really outside of the bounds of what's appropriate, where you're getting into this, you know, disagree but commit space. And here I want to call attention. Oh,
sorry, there's a baby sitting. I'm a mommy, so excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even see the other
I was
baby.
waving. Sorry for interrupting.
That's okay. So I really want to call attention here to the fact that the goal isn't equality of outcome. That is, my goal in doing all of this isn't necessarily, you know, get 50% of the distinguished engineer technical fellows, you know, at Oracle to be women. I don't think that's practical, nor is that necessarily good. What we really want to do is align around the equality of opportunity, making sure that people have, that everybody has the same opportunity, and then you're letting, all I'm asking is let our work speak for itself. Let our work speak for itself once you've leveled the playing field. So when you get into this territory of somebody wants to be treated in maybe a way that that you don't think they're merited for. You know, a prime example here is, what if a junior engineer on the team comes to me and says, "Oh, I want to be the lead engineer for this design." I say, "Well, we're going to disagree and commit there. You know, I haven't seen this. You're welcome to put together your own design. Here are other designs that we're going to compare." And give everybody the equal opportunity to act in the way that they want to be treated, and to solicit that level of respect that they want to be treated with. But we really want to hold back from saying, yes, we're only successful if, you know, every disabled person, every LGBT person, every woman, you know, has the same outcome. If we set that as the goal, all we're going to do is, you know, tilt the playing field the other way. And that doesn't do anybody any good. Like, when you have these unlevel playing fields, it harms women in the room and men in the room in different ways and unequally. But if all we do is turn that around, all we're going to do is be, you know, harming exactly the same people, exactly the opposite ways. So that's why this is this fundamental intersectional dynamic is really core, and that's the process of, let's all hear the problems that face, you know, only other people, with, you know, active listening and you know, respecting what we heard. And that gets us, that has in every case that I've used it, that's gotten my teams out in front of these problems that are based in intersectionality.
Thank you so much. Yeah, of course, Charlotte. Now, may I ask Mrs. Dr. Charlotte Glasser to unmute yourself and tell us the comments you had in the chat. And really...
Okay, and I'm muted. Yes, it's a complex question, but I'm quite fascinating that we have two very severely handicapped persons sitting debating others as potentially classified as handicapped. There are two persons in this dialogue having glasses. But that has sort of become a normal handicap because we have innovation health. We may produce scientific knowledge about sight, and that enables the two of you to be in this conference and to work and to function. But in many countries, still in many countries, you will be stigmatized as handicapped, even if there are surgeries that take 10 minutes to make. They make them in India now, 10, 20 minutes, to just, for instance, deviations in the wide span of outcomes of human diversification in individuals. So I would ask you to take a little bit of step back and think of the classification and the stigmatization in the word and construct of handicap. If you have an anthropology, I think we have to start with that we're all human beings, but we are all different. But we say that some differentiation is a handicap in relation to what? That's the most important question when it comes to company. If I, for example, had a car crash and I got both my legs chopped off and I'm sitting in a wheelchair, how much does that matter of the surgery if I'm a top programmer and the only thing I need is a wide enough door at the company to get inside, or an electronic access to overcome not only COVID-19. And I would say the company doesn't have innovation hub if they don't have wide enough doors. And this is the more visible example. When if you have someone in hearing impaired, it's very difficult to get good technology. We're all struggling with these headsets, more or less good, and transmission lines, starting to perceive that type of personal obstacle to communication. I use not innovation. I prefer not to use handicap.
No,
but so
I was
and then if I get a headset that gives enough discrimination and perhaps 5G instead of 2G, that distorts voice and make it very bad, and I don't have a satellite line that make everything cracks and break instead by a car and a fan, then all of a sudden I have innovation hub because I can participate in the conference. So, and I may have my glasses and contact lenses, but that we kind of normalize. Not so much hearing impairment, it's still deaf and dumb, particularly in school, and we have special classes, etc., etc. Instead of say, well, this school leadership or this firm leadership or this church don't have innovation hub, or this society, because we don't finance tools to make these people more able to do the job they can do. I mean, a bigger door that we almost have everywhere. I think fine on my discussion, but I defined innovation hub in the way that it exists in the human being, in the firm, and in society. So if there are hearing aids and company makes them and allows to have it when you can do a job where you need hearing, but the firm or the society don't finance these hearing aids or enable you to buy your glasses, then I would say the society doesn't have innovation hub, for the firm doesn't have that. If the top programmer can all of a sudden not go to job because he had a toxic incident in COVID-19 that took away his hearing. So this is how I would like to think about it, that we're all different. Like super intelligent people, 30% of teenagers that have a very high skill set for something have been to child psychiatric care in Sweden because they're different. So what is different? Not here, or to be super smart, or to play the violin perfectly, and how that's fit with people that have different skill sets and extraordinary skill sets that compared to what we perceive as normal.
Yes.
That doesn't exist. We have normal curves for everything from grades to, clothes and whatever. But that person doesn't exist. I'm sorry.
May I ask you to add in the chat the link to your research you're mentioning, this
Yes,
innovation?
It's quite complex. I add the page, you may see the definition, and then you can work from there. I also used Edith Stein's philosophy of psychology in the humanities, and I've taken her philosophical anthropology that is value neutral, but it really what it states is that we're all human and we're all different, and the layers that you work with in this Indian discussion of the house of skill sets, it was very close to what VHO use, that is also Edith Stein. But I think we need to have some type of foundational anthropology, and that also explains organization. And then if I have this physical handicap, I can't walk, or I have a particular shoe, does it have to say in my CV? No, not if I'm a programmer. And the only thing I need is my hand and my brain. And I need to get into the door. I will put up the link.
And thank you so much. And this shouldn't be the problem, just to have the door. What I would like to mention here is, because there is some, now the question also, if we know any management education program that includes disability dimension into the content. As Franca also said, we do not know this or haven't heard about this, but maybe Dana, did you hear, or maybe the other audience participants?
Yeah, I would poll the audience on this. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, the question to the audience: do you know any education where the disability dimension is included? So maybe we really have to ask then Google or other research.
I don't know, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure whether that would be the right path, or whether we're, I mean, or whether it would be a question of having a better HR education in business.
I can, yeah, because then it's again the stamp.
Take a more holistic approach than to single out, okay, this is how you have to treat people with this disability, and now we have an elective course in our MBA program for that. I think this is, it's probably a good start to have it and to learn from it, but what we really want in the business curricula is to integrate these topics, these questions into the core subjects. To teach, to teach finance in a way that is inclusive, to teach HR in a way, of course, that is inclusive, to teach engineers how to build things that are accessible and that work for more people, rather than singling out and saying like, okay, now here we have this elective course where you learn how to treat people with disabilities. I don't think that is necessarily the best way to go about it. But again, this is a spontaneous reaction rather than any deeper knowledge that I'm bringing here. And one point I find quite interesting also is that we have to learn to not think about these things as so bipolar. The example with the glasses, disability is, we're thinking of either you're able or you're not able, and of course not. There's anything in between. If we're looking at skin tone, it's not black or white. It's anything in between. If we're looking at gender, it's not only male or only female, but we're everything in between. So we have to stop thinking of these concepts as bipolar, as either you're one or the other, and look at it much more as a continuum where everyone sits at a different place and everyone has small capacities that others don't have, and some we lack. Three of us, our eyes are not as good as we sometimes wish they would be, I guess. And so I think that is something that we have to overcome, this thinking that you're either or.
Yeah, this is also what Ilona now wrote, that integration of the human health and then in this entire curricula, because then it's again with the stamp and like aliens, this is how to treat, they are different. So this would be really a mess if we would have this. I also have here the question from Francis regarding the tattoos. I do not exactly understand your question. Maybe you would like to unmute yourself and raise it. Or maybe somebody.
My question, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. I was discussing with a friend recently, and I live in Nigeria. And a friend was telling me that tattoo is bad, is something that is culturally, badly seen and all that. And I was so impressed. I mean, looking at Dan just now, I mean, saw tattoo on her hand, and I'm like, wow, decent people like this can wear tattoo, exactly. So can you explain to me, how can you explain to people like that, to this part of the prejudice that I think people have? How can you explain to them that this thing is not so bad? I mean, it can also be an agent for good.
Certainly, certainly. So I face a lot of this, not just for the tattoos and multiple piercings. I'm also 6'4". I should be able to convert this into meters if anybody's quicker than me at this. I'm ridiculously tall, very, very, very tall. So tall that when I walk into the room, people see my tattoos and they judge. People see my piercings and they judge. And then people see how tall I am and then they think that I'm trans and then I judge, and then they judge, but I'm not. Big picture. But these are all things that people are looking at me, making a decision that doesn't actually represent, like, this is all of my own art. These are, this is very sacred work for me. And I can use that to build common ground. And where I need to disagree and commit, I'm sorry, I don't see eye to eye on these judgment calls that you're making. But here, let's build on common ground of values. And then from that point, that comfort that you can bring with common values and common goals, that comfort eases off of the judgment eventually. Like, two people are always going to find a way to see eye to eye if you focus on that, if that's the thing that you're trying to do. So again, this path of intersectionality, like Franca says, sometimes you just have to disagree and commit. Or I forget, Franco, what the specific terms were that you were. It was disagree.
Agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree. Yep. Where some of these are cultural signifiers, and I can use these as conversation starters as well. But yeah, that this prejudice exists, and you can't really make it not exist. All you can do is build common ground when it does come up.
Thank you very much. I'm really appreciative.
Yeah, I also this is also a little bit what is coming to the next question of Sabriya Sahoud, and I experienced this tattoos when I was young. I'm still young, but when I was a teenager, tattoos for especially girls was a no-go in my family. I'm coming from a Polish, really Catholic family, and these were like, okay, look how when you will be older, it will not look any nicer anymore, and girls do not have tattoos, etc. Then my kid's sister came. Now she has beautiful paintings, even a butterfly on the back, and her husband is also has really a lot of stories of his life painted or tattooed. So these times are changing. I can imagine this is also the experience and the education. What was okay in previous times and what we now accept as art. So this is something you're creating, and this is a symbol for you. Maybe somebody died, maybe there happened something beautiful, it did totally different, or some specific symbols from religion. So everybody has his own story, and this you can see now. Nowadays we need to be more open. This is also diversity, to accept everybody else, what he wants to do, what he loves to do, and what is important. So to let the other, I don't know how it's in English, but in anderen leben lassen, to let the other person live. and give the space and everything. So this is my motto. So and I'm driving quite good with it. So, but let's coming to the education, how we are raising. I hope I'm saying the name appropriate. Supriya Sahu or Supriya Sahu. Do you think that the girls or the way girls are raised, which is of course different from boys, influences them into making decisions which isn't in their best interest? Making decisions that doesn't reflect their full potential. What's your decision or opinion on this? Can we discuss this, please? Yeah, this is something that is still in a lot of countries. We are now in Europe, that's good, but in other countries, the situation of women and girls is totally different. Especially also we are working in Africa, the boys, and if there is money, then the boys are allowed to go to schools because girls are not so valid. So, but may I give the question to Franca? How do you see this, and what is your opinion on this?
I'm looking for the question, or can you just repeat it again?
It's quite one of the last ones. Just shortly repeat that girls are differently raised, and that's not always good. It's also not good for the boys to be raised in the old-fashioned way. So in general, it's about how girls are raised, and if this is a good thing, the old-fashioned way. No, did you find the question? It's really about that girls are raised differently.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the answer.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought maybe.
Yeah, no, because I have several angles to reply on that. So I mean, so for example, I've participated 2 months ago in another panel. It was about the impact on foreign investments. So the impact of female empowerment on investment from foreign countries, and the whole topic was pretty kind of shocking, because they believe that, for example, empowering a woman has an impact on the economy from a country, and so what at the end is the perspective here, that a woman gets attention because it could have an impact to empower a woman on the economical scale on a country, and this way of thinking, I think that's incredible. That's incredible to think that way. That's yeah, we need more women, and that's why we educate them, because they can act as a resource in a company. And it's like, sorry, but this should not be the starting point to empower women and be to see women as equal as men. And I also have been in an LGBTQ exhibition in a club from Berlin, where they also played with the stereotypes from men and girls. And I think they are so much old-fashioned with the colors of blue, and so what is for girls, what is for men. So with a feminism point of view, it's like all these stereotypes, they are so old-fashioned. So I really, to answer this question, we go in a really deep direction where we could have another conference about it.
Right.
but it has a big influence how you raise a girl, and sometimes if you're not really thinking how badly you can influence your girl if you raise it old-fashioned, then more with empowerment and trust and appreciation. So this whole livelihood topic to really support each kid and whatever.
And I think it's really on both sides. There's really a pressure on a female and a male side. For example, so look, for example, Liv Strömquist, she's from Scandinavia. I think she's amazing, a role model for feminism. But she wrote many books about also prejudices and stereotypes from a man and woman, and also how love is capitalized by the society, which is quite interesting. But I'm also asking in this whole discussion myself always, how much pressure do men have? All these stereotypes of being strong, don't cry, don't talk about feelings, don't wear dresses, don't have long hair, don't be feminine, are you gay, or whatever. And it's like, wow, how much pressure also on the other side. And so for example, in my circle of friends, we talk about this. This is one of the top topics that we are talking and discussing about. And every time when we have a discussion in our girls group, I always send the discussions and the input to my male friends and ask them about their perspective, because what I observe is that this discussion is separated. Women have the discussion or men have the discussion. And I think what we should embrace much more is to have the discussion at the same time, how we raise our children and how we interact with those stereotypes and overcome them. So.
Ernst, you got the feedback. This is the next topic of the conference, right? I also have here some arguments and some strong questions about what means empowerment of women, to whom we are empowering them, etc., etc. So to have the time to watch the time, we have 3 minutes left. Is this right?
Yes.
Yes, so let me check. Francis, I'm sorry you had already, and I can imagine the input of Charlotte is also really valid, but Eva, here is first of all Leah Marie Lucas. It's important to interrogate the terminology of women's empowerment. You're totally right. Who is giving power to whom? I know this wording is quite tricky, but it's more this empowerment, giving them a good feeling that they can do something good and have to. I would like to use also the last 2 minutes. Is this okay, Ernst? We have from Light for the World, what I love to mention is really amazing inclusive education programs in Africa. So we really have it in Burkina Faso and in Ethiopia, where we start to appreciate, to teach the community that people or kids with disability are also really important, and give them the feeling and teach them that it doesn't matter what color, if something is missing, they also have the right to have an education and a beautiful life. So this is something we're starting with the communities, and then this early childhood, and then the school system. We also educating the teachers how to teach kids that are blind, that are deaf, etc. So, and also provide wheelchairs that the kids can go to school, also physiotherapy, etc. that the kid is starting to move. So these are really amazing projects until the empowerment, and also helping them to become economically independent. So this is the whole way, and that's really beautiful. As well, the topic about eyes and everything. We have a session at 6 12:30, a colleague of mine, Iram, will do the introduction of Light for the World and also talk about the Enable Me project. This is a project where we are building a platform in Kenya that people with disability can share their experience and knowledge, how they are dealing with specific life situations. So this is also beautiful. So more than happy if you like to I need to do now some advertising. I will put the Light for the World homepage, the link, and then invite you. More than happy to research a bit or contact us in case of any questions, and more than happy if you will support any of our amazing projects, especially in these times in Ethiopia. It's not easy for the moment and really dangerous. So I'm more than happy. And Ernst is also a big supporter of us.
And Light for the World is a supporter of this conference also. You are, if anyone wants to find out more, the logo with link is on the conference webpage. So you're just one click away from learning a lot more about what Light for the World does.
Thank you so much. And thank you very much for this beautiful discussion. It was amazing. Thank you, Franca. Thank you, Dana. It was really nice meeting you. It's still dark in the back. Oh my goodness, you are a hero. Amazing. Hope to keep in touch. We will find each other on LinkedIn, and wish you a wonderful session. If I remember right, with Nigeria.
Yes, I think so. Right. But in between, we've got a lounge session in between, so don't go anywhere. But thank you so much for the moderation, and to our speakers also. It was fun. I didn't expect that you would roll me in as well, Marta. But
I'm sorry.
No, that was fine, because I listened a lot more actively and wasn't like trying to answer emails and do things in the background for keeping the conference running. I was actually focusing on this panel full now, and that was great for me. So I loved it. Thank you so much for joining us and for all your insights that you were sharing. And I'm unspotlighting us, I think, is the way this works on Zoom now, so that we don't see only us, but that we go back to the other view. And so let's continue with the program then, which is now one of the lounge sessions, and I'm very happy to introduce Corinne Cobben. Are you there?
Hello.
Hey there. And I need to find you and then make you big.
Should I talk more?
Yes, that's the way to do it, exactly.
Yeah. Oh God, I see myself.
Yeah, well, we do too. Right. So, Corinne, you're talking about us to us about an organization called Ignite, right? And I'm very, very happy about the fact that I've been knowing Ignite ever since they got founded a few years ago at the University of St. Gallen. And the core proposal, as far as I understand it, but you will correct me over the next 20 minutes, is to support and create networks and allow students to access the whole thinking and world of purpose-driven business, right? So, and purpose, of course, defined as something bigger than shareholder value, but purpose in a meaningful way. And so the organization is called Ignite. They are also a sponsor of this conference, so you can also find their logo and link on the conference webpage. And I'll hand the word over to you now.
Great, thank you. I will quickly share my screen because I have prepared some slides to create a more visual experience.
Now.
Super. Un momento. So. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Tuscan background. Okay, super. Hello, everyone. My name is Corinne Cobben, and I am from the Ignite movement in St. Gallen, Switzerland. I'm super happy to join you today and talk to you a little bit more about the Ignite movement and what we do. So first of all, I will show you who are we. Well, you can see here the team And this is the team currently, and it's a team picture from our conference. We are about 20 students at the bachelor and master level, and we work in self-managed teams. We are very inspired and motivated by purpose-driven topics, and I thought I would tell you why I joined Ignite myself, so that you can kind of understand what we are about. So it took me a very long time at the University of St. Gallen to find my place, because it was very much about, you know, your career and, you know, climbing up the ladder, doing internships. And I had worked in 2 companies before where I was at the bottom of the rung, and I was told what to do. My opinion never mattered. My, let's say, rights were never respected, in the sense like lunch was promised 1 hour, I would get 5 minutes. I never felt comfortable talking to management, and I really felt like management was very two-sided. I mean, they were one way to us to our face, and then behind our backs, which I would also get to know of, they would say all these types of things, and I'm like, okay, I'm here to earn money, that's it. And so purpose-driven topics had always been close to my heart, but I never noticed it. And at Ignite, we have a lot, at the University of St. Gallen, we have a lot of associations that are really about business, consulting, banking, all that stuff, which I'm like, okay, there's so much to choose from, but I want to do something different. And when Ignite came on my path, I was like, okay, this is for me, because at Ignite, we promote purpose-driven business. And so I'll move on to the next slide. So what's our mission at Ignite? Well, we want to draw a path towards a more meaningful business world by providing a platform that connects like-minded people, especially students, and then businesses and speakers, through our conference and the content we provide. And the main topics that we discuss include leadership, such as transformational and servant leadership, company culture, and organizational design. And who said this? I read a book, something with employee motivation, and they said that profit should be used as a resource to enhance the purpose of the company. And that is something that we also believe in Ignite, and we believe that purpose strongly impacts profits as well. So it's a vice versa situation. So our vision is to create business as a source for good, and that every employee finds its fit in the company on a purpose and cultural level, and that purpose-driven leaders, transformational leaders, becomes the norm. And the cool thing is that we are already seeing that happen. Especially since I joined Ignite, I've really seen it happen, which is really cool. So the topics that we mainly discuss at Ignite include obviously purpose, and like Ernst mentioned before, purpose is hard to define in a company. It's also something hard to define for yourself, but it is something that we feel and that motivates us. And because we are working probably now 70% of our lives, we want to include we want to bring ourselves to work, and therefore purpose is important for everyone. And another topic that we discuss is company culture. We look at a lot of company cultures and also think about how can we implement these at Ignite. We are like I've mentioned before, maybe a self-managed organization. So we have a flat hierarchy. Everybody has as much opportunity to say and make decisions as everybody else. And so it's very democratic in that way. And so we like to look at different companies, see what things they implement, and see if it works for us. And we'll get deeper into that a little bit later on. Obviously, purpose or profit, how effective are extrinsic or intrinsic motivators, topics like this. Self-management is a big topic with us. The Ignite conference just last October was heavily focused on self-management and holacracy. the tools and practices that enhance purpose-driven business, and transformational and servant leadership. Within Ignite, we've also thought about implementing servant leadership, but this is a topic that was heavily discussed because we are obviously flat hierarchy, and we're afraid of the implications that certain leadership roles could have, and therefore we thought of having rotational servant leadership so that everybody gets a chance. I'm getting too, I'm maybe going off on a tangent, but what do we actually do? How do we put these topics into practice? So our main event is the annual Ignite conference, and it's usually a 2-day event every year where we have about 10 speakers join us from around the world, talk about employee motivation, purpose, agility, sustainability, all of these types of topics, and across all types of industries, which makes the Ignite conference really a platform for everybody, for every student interested in many topics. Another thing, we do our workshops throughout the year. Last November, we had the pleasure of being joined by Bob Chapman from Barry Wehmiller, and that was a very big moment for us to meet him. Another thing we do are company visits. For example, we visited Amsterdam and visited companies like Visi. We do community events at the University of St. Gallen with other clubs that are focused on social business areas and sustainability. We also have the Ignite Book Club, and this is something internal where we look at books like Frederic Laloux's Reinventing Organizations, or Simon Sinek's Start With Why, or Corporate Rebels, all these types of books that really motivate us and can drive us deeper into topics of purpose-driven business. And then we have the Ignite content book. This is something new that a team at Ignite is working on. And here we are every month, we're trying every month to release a booklet to our external readers on topics of purpose, servant leadership, organizational design, and corporate culture, and give practice examples of how these things are being implemented. And this month or next month's release will be on purpose and what that means for different people and different companies. So you can look forward to that if you follow us on our LinkedIn and follow our website. So then how do we make these things happen? How do we make the things that we do happen? We have 2 working principles. The first working principle is that we should not use force or coercion against each other. And the second working principle is that people should honor the commitments that they make to one another. And these 2 principles are key for us to be able to work as a flat hierarchy. But some of you may have heard of these working principles before, and they come from the company Morningstar. I can go a little bit into depth of Morningstar. So these 2 working principles were implemented by Chris Rufer, and Morningstar is the biggest self-managed tomato processing company in the whole world, and there is no form of hierarchy there at all. These 2 working principles is all that they implement, and we were heavily inspired by that because we had at least 10 working principles and nobody knew what they were. They were way too complex and too specific, but these 2 working principles, they encompass all of the working principles we had before. And a big thing at Morningstar is managing complexity with simplicity. And this is something that inspired us. Then I will not go too in depth, but Ignite during COVID, that's something that may be interesting for you, how we experienced it. So I actually joined the team in February, and I never met the team. I was onboarded online, and it was really cool how welcoming they were. I was actually very scared to join a team because I thought I was underqualified, but they were very welcoming, and I was put into the speakers team. Actually, I wanted to go there, obviously, and they were very welcoming. And then in May, we met Ernst, which was really cool. And there I am in a Zoom meeting with the rest of the team meeting Ernst. And he then joined the Ignite conference this year. And in June, we had no partners. So we were wondering, oh no, can we even do a conference this year? And can we even continue with Ignite without any money? And then in July, we decided, okay, with the funds that we have, let's do an evening. Instead of a 2-day conference, let's do an evening. It will be online and in person so that people from abroad can join us, and people who are too scared to come to a event because of the current pandemic, they can join online as well. And then we were blessed with a donation, so we're out of the red for a bit. And then when we could go back on campus, when the semester started again, we were joined by 7 new members, which was really a big moment for us because that's the biggest amount of people that have joined Ignite at once ever. And our team was really big. So by the time that the conference happened, also the bonds really got close because we could meet in person. And that was also the first time that I have met my team in person, which was really cool. And thankfully, because we've met so much online, how am I on time actually? Oh, yeah, I'm good. Because we met so much online, those relationships were already there, but they were really manifested when I met them in person. And I can say that our team is very motivational and kind, also feedback giving, which was really cool. Yes, and obviously before the conference, you just think, okay, how can everything go wrong, especially with Corona? Well, the cases in Switzerland were heavily going up. And 2 days before, the Swiss government had released new regulations that were even more tight to hold events in person. One of our speakers had to go online. A lot of things went wrong. And the day after the conference was held, the University of St. Gallen no longer allowed any club to hold any more events. So we were very lucky that we were able to do the event, but it was a great experience. I'll get into the Ignite conference a little more now. So this year, like I said, we had an evening, and here's Ernst joining us. We had 90 people join us in person, which was an insane turnout than what we expected. And we had Ignite face masks for everyone prepared, and everybody was seated 1.5 meters apart. And our mindset was, okay, if we do a conference, we want to do it the safe way. We really want to make sure that everybody feels welcome and comfortable. And our team wore gloves. I was really impressed by how well we worked together. So we had 4 speakers. 3 of them joined us online, and one of them, which was Ernst, joined us in person. He was what I call the last man standing. And the topics that were discussed at the conference were obviously about purpose and how that can be facilitated by, for example, self-management. And 3 of our speakers talked about self-management and holacracy. And then Ernst talked about dignity in the workplace, and these topics all really tied in well together. And yeah, if you'd like to see more, you can find it on our website. You can find the keynotes, the recordings as well. I'll go into a little more depth about what the keynotes actually talked about. We were lucky enough that my sister, Florence Cobbin, drew out or graphically recorded all of the keynotes. And so you can relive the keynote through the image. So Tom van der Lubbe, he was one of our speakers, and he is Dutch, and he's from the company Ftse. And I thought I'd share with you the main takeaways or things that were important for me. And the key takeaway from his keynote was that leadership in Scandinavian countries and, for example, in the Swiss government is rotational, and you actually never know who the president is. And at the company Ftse, they implement holacracy, meaning that there's no hierarchy and everybody functions in roles, in set roles. And they have a transparent salary model, which is also very interesting to look at in terms of intrinsic motivation. So that was one key takeaway, and that's also something that we then wanted to implement at Ignite with our servant leadership role. Then the next keynote was Doug Kirkpatrick, and his keynote was on the No Limits Enterprise, and he is someone that we wanted since 2015 to join us at the conference. So we were really lucky that he could join us, and even online, you know, across time zones. It was really cool. And the main takeaway from his keynote was the 2 working principles that we have now also implemented at Ignite. That they were so simple. Then the next keynote was by Christoph Barmann. He's from the company Leuco, which is also a Swiss company, and there they also implement holacracy. The main takeaway was that they removed hierarchy. They removed hierarchy at a certain point, and Christoph Barmann is now the ex-CEO because there is now no more hierarchy, and that employees are free to work when, how, where they want at any time. And those leadership models, just also for our audience, is so new. And what was striking for me at the end of the conference, how many people came up to me saying, "What, I learned about this in theory. I never knew that this was actually possible." For example, at Morningstar, that there are 2,500 employees without a boss working, and that everybody commits to their tasks. How is that possible? And that was really, really cool for me to experience. And the final keynote was from Ernst von Klimakowitz, and he held his keynote on discovering dignity in the workplace. And a key takeaway for me was that dignity cannot really be defined, but you know when you are being treated with dignity at work. And so that's a cool, so we all know what dignity means for ourselves. And I thought that was very cool. Then I think I've come to the end of the presentation about what Ignite is, but we hope that maybe we have inspired you to join us next year to the conference, and we would like to do a hybrid situation next year as well, and it will be on the 26th and 27th of October. So please save the date if you would like to join. Also, if you would like to hold a workshop with us or partner with us, be a speaker, a moderator, we would love to get in contact with you. You can contact us under hello@ignitemovement.com, and you can find us on our LinkedIn and Instagram to find out more. And I really hope that we may have inspired you somehow and made you happy, you know, with that we are trying to promote purpose-driven business in the future. It's something that has a topic that has been in the works over the past 5 years, and a rare thing in organizations at the University of St. Gallen. So thank you very much for listening.
Let me just end your screen sharing and
yes,
get back here. So thank you so much. This is super exciting, and yes, I think on your take from my presentation, I think the correct way would be that I haven't yet defined dignity for myself. I'm sure that people would object that you can't define dignity, but for myself, I'm still working on that for sure. What definition I want to use or go with, because it is complex and not easily defined. But the important part here for everyone, and why we're so happy to have you, is that you know, if you look back like 10, 15 years ago, the graduates from top business school all wanted to go to Wall Street or maybe to some tech firms, and we're eager to have the very traditional prestigious business careers. And when I'm looking around today at business schools, there's so many of these really interesting, forward-looking, purpose-driven initiatives that, you know, we can reasonably be optimistic, even if not my generation or older, even are gonna solve the challenges we have. You will. And so congratulations on that, and a fantastic project you've got running there, and best of luck, and I look forward to collaborating in the future with Ignite again.